But for right now, Brett, now we get to do this. We get to go full on into the Batman. We're not worried about spoilers anymore. We are officially in the spoiler zone.
We're dancing.
So we're dancing. We're dancing. So earlier you mentioned that there was a particular point in the movie where the score or the motif of Batman was played to its most powerful effect. And when was that for you, Brett?
So there were actually maybe like two moments different,
Mm-hmm.
but for the main one with the down 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 was
Yeah.
that incredible freeway chase scene with the Batmobile and Penguin. They kept like interspersing the theme with him
Yeah.
just like doing these crazy maneuvers on the road, and I thought like there was hitting me so hard. I was like, this is Batman as fuck right now. Like it just totally was like, this is
Yeah.
so Batman, and they just nailed it. Um, I also particularly loved there was some use at the end in the third act, and then there's this like really if you listen to the entire theme, because they did like show the actual track, you can
Yeah.
listen to it on YouTube or whatever for free.
Yeah.
There's this like little sweet motif that kind of comes in with it that's got this like very heroic, inspiring, like
Yeah.
melancholy sound, and they
Yep.
use that beautiful moment at the end when Batman. I mean, we should talk about the third act because I've seen a lot of people saying that was where things kind of fell apart for them
Yeah.
in
I
a
don't
way.
get it.
And for me, I thought that was such a tremendous third act. I thought it was incredible, and the ending was so hopeful and inspiring. And you
Mm-hmm.
actually, we talk about this like all the time, right? We don't see heroes being heroes, and like
Yeah.
you really saw this Batman grow. And you saw him at
Yep.
the end just being heroic and being out with the people and not
And
hiding.
realizing
And
why he had to be. It wasn't arbitrary. There like
yeah, it was so
something clicked.
powerful.
Yeah.
It really
So
was,
powerful.
and that score worked there tremendously. And I everything about the score just like elevated that movie to another level.
Yeah.
But yeah,
Well, like you
I
said,
don't
we
get
should.
that criticism. Yeah, with
Yeah.
the third act.
The third act thing, I saw a little bit about that too. And, so I went in just kind of with a little bit of trepidation, just wondering, like, I wonder what that's
Yeah,
about. Because in other times where I've heard that critique, are in movies where there was a certain tone and a certain quality up to a certain point, but then in the third act it just becomes about the spectacle and the CGI, and suddenly now it's like, oh, okay, now we're in the third act of every other CBM and I can tune out until the good guy
right.
wins. Okay, cool. So I kind of thought maybe it was going to go that way, but like it never lost the story. It never lost the thread of why we were doing any of this.
Right.
Everything that happens there in the third act is like the natural progression of where things should go. And I feel like maybe people were thrown off by like the false ending of like catching the Riddler. Maybe they thought that, oh, the movie's ending. So the fact that it continued past that point, people just like they had already mentally sort of checked out. And now it's like, wait, there's
Right.
more. But
That's what
whatever
I
the
was thinking.
case,
Yeah. Or
yeah,
people were mad about like the big that it did evolve into like this big like I don't know what to say, like big attack on the city,
yeah.
and it kind of like grew outside of the smaller intimate aspect of the
Yeah,
film.
but
I can see maybe that's what people were
yeah,
mad about, but I'm not even sure what anyone was like.
yeah, I'm
you
not
know
even trying to figure out why people would dislike certain things like that. But
yeah,
honestly, the third act to me felt like a natural progression of the story. It caught me totally by surprise. It was shocking when you realize that he was going to blow these sea walls and we're going to flood the city, and there's no real way to stop it. Let's talk about that. Batman basically fails, by the way.
yeah,
This whole like, yeah, he gets the bad guy, but like none of this goes very easily. The whole city gets flooded. Yeah, they don't talk about a death toll, but you have to imagine there's been a lot
yeah,
of casualties on this night. And even there in the arena, he kind of loses, like the fight doesn't go exactly as planned, and that center thing is about to electrocute and kill all the
yeah,
remaining people, and he has to like, none of this is easy and none of this is like nice and tidy. Batman saved the day and we all get to ride
yeah,
off into the sunset. This was a struggle, and he wasn't able to avoid the calamity that it became, but somewhere in there he found the he found the hero in him. He stopped
Right.
becoming just the violent vigilante and became the hero that can inspire Gotham to actually be better.
Yeah, you
It's
really see
incredible.
the toll that being Batman has taken on
Mm-hmm.
this, version of the character. I mean, in every way too, not just physically, obviously physically. I mean, yeah. Actually, I want to let's talk about that a little bit. The
Sure.
First of all, the physicality in this movie was just tremendous, and
Yep.
in contrast to some of the things that came before, something that was frustrating to me in some of the Nolan films was the way
Yes.
that a lot of the fight scenes were shot. They were very,
Oh, for
especially in
sure.
Batman Begins, it got a little better as the series went on, but Batman Begins, I mean, it was so frenetic. You couldn't see anything. The shots were too close. You couldn't see what was happening. You couldn't see any of the choreography. And I feel like
Mm-hmm.
every time there was a fight scene in this, you could see every little thing that was going on. It was visceral, and you really see Batman. He's taking hits, like
Yes.
I shouldn't say in some of these fights. Like he takes a lot of hits in each
Yeah.
fight. Like
A
he's
lot
not
of
like this
punishment.
perfect like judo master, just like countering everything. Like he really gives it his all, and it's a
Yeah.
struggle. Like he's burnt at the end of these fights. Like it's
Mm-hmm.
something that in the original like Watchmen comic,
Yeah.
they didn't really do it in the movie version, but in the comics, like you see, there's that scene where the Silk Spectre, like they get into like a big fight, like in the alleyway, and at the end of it in the comic, you see them like they look haggard and like
Yeah.
ugly and sweaty and like spent and just beat. And that's like that's the reality of like what this would be. So
Yeah.
I love that it wasn't like this perfect, he wasn't this perfect savior, so to speak.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, okay, I'm trying to think of like where we go next because I could talk about this movie for probably hours and hours. But
Yeah, I could do.
let me ask you, like with Catwoman, what did
Mhm.
you think of Zoe Kravitz's Selena Kyle?
It was her characterization was perfect. I loved it. I loved the Carmine Falcone being her father, which is kind of like a newer thing
Mm-hmm.
that's been suggested in like some of the comics and stuff. But
Yeah.
I thought she played it. I should in general with the tone of this film, because some people were saying, "Oh, it's," and you. This was something you were worried about. It's very
Mm-hmm.
gritty. It's very real. It feels too close to the Nolan films. But really, after seeing that film, uh, it made, in retrospect, it made the Nolan films feel more fantastical to me and less
Hmm.
grounded, because this was so grounded. And
Yeah.
honestly, if anything, I got more Batman 89, Batman Returns vibes and atmosphere and tone from this movie than I
Yeah.
did from the Nolan films. Like I was totally getting that way more. But
Isn't it funny
definitely.
how it's simultaneously more grounded but also more stylized than the
Yes,
Nolan
and
films, right? Like it's you'd
yeah,
you'd be amazed because you'd think, oh, more grounded. It's going to seem just super real world and tactical and logical, and yet no. This is definitely like a comic books, like stylized,
yeah.
heightened reality. You know,
There's like a little bit of like that, like I almost want to say there was like some Batman 66 like influence like in there. Like even like the way that Zoe Kravitz played the character, like she had some of those, like there were some of those like cheesy or like not corn cheesy or corny, but like those little one-liners, oh, I have a thing for
at least she
straight.
didn't purr like an
I have
actual
nine
cat.
lives. Yeah, she didn't
Yeah,
purr at least,
and I'm
but like
glad she didn't actually purr.
I didn't mind those lines, like the
Yeah,
"oh, I have 9 lives," whatever. Like yeah, it was a little cat punny, but
yeah,
like it called back to the campiness of the old ones, but it was delivered so well and earnestly
yeah.
that. But I like that. Like I feel like Reeves really pulled from like the entire like
He really
Batman
did.
universe that
Hmm.
we've seen. I mean, even like the animated series, you could see like influence and touches from that in there.
Hmm. One
Just the
thing
way
that
some shots were
surprised
framed and
me,
stuff.
yeah. One thing that surprised me though about Catwoman was that I'm used to her being like there being two dynamics to her where you're not quite sure if she's with you or against you. And I'm not criticizing, but I noticed like Reeves seems to be painting her as if she really is just like a straight up anti-hero, that she's not
Mhm.
also a villain who might be trying to stick it to Batman. You know what I
Right.
mean? He play like his Selena Kyle is actually sort of earnest and trying her best to make the best of a crappy situation. Which all Selena Kyles have been that way, but they've also been a little bit duplicitous, and you can't
Right.
quite trust her. And sometimes she'll do things that screws Batman over for her own gain. So
Right.
that was one thing I noticed about the characterization here. Is like, all right, so he's playing Selena like she really is like one of the other heroes in the story. So I thought that was interesting.
Yeah, she was really like
Um,
a co lead. You know,
yeah,
it's very much like her story as well, which I really
yeah.
appreciated.
Yeah. By the way, since we were talking about it a couple weeks ago, they did end up going full telltale with this, right? With like,
Yeah,
with the Wayne family coming from old money and what that family means to Gotham City and how they're not actually this lily white family, or at least that's how Riddler sort of framed it.
right.
That Thomas basically put a hit out on this reporter and the him getting killed seemed to be some kind of mob retaliation for all of that. So they did ultimately go down that path. What
Yeah,
did you think of how they handled the Thomas Wayne isn't quite as good as we thought element of the story here?
yeah. No, I loved it, and I was totally on board with that. I'm always on board for the choice that makes like the character a character more interesting.
Yes.
And it does. It makes him even more Batman even more interesting having to contend with that as well. You know, Falcone says to him, you know, you thought your father was a Boy Scout.
Yeah.
Or no, maybe did he say it or Alfred said it? No, I think Falcone said it to
It's
him.
Falcone. Yeah.
Yeah, it's Falcone. And yeah, like that was such like a cool dynamic. And then it turned out that like, you know, he made a lapse in judgment. It wasn't like he was like fully in with the mob.
Hmm.
But I liked that little, you know, the way they played with that. I really all the little twists and turns I really loved in this film. I thought
Yeah.
everyone was engaging and it you know, as you said in your review, when you're doing like a noir kind of, you know, detective driven thing, there is a little bit of the smartest person in the room kind of
Yeah.
thing. And yes, figure everything out.
Yeah.
But I mean, it was really handled very well. I mean, the movie was like really well paced.
But hang on, but since
You
you
know, saying
mentioned
all that.
my review, yeah,
Yeah.
since you mentioned the review, like one example of a negative, because something that I wrote about in the review is that a lot of times in these kind of movies where there's so many twists and turns and so much information that has to get conveyed and so many little things have to happen for the plot to move forward, is you inevitably end up where certain big plot points happen through some crazy convenience or through some, like what is the chance that this person you need, and now I can be specific about that though, because in the review I was being vague because it's a
Right.
spoiler free review. But like that scene where he sends her to the 44 Below Club, right? And
Hmm.
she's got the contacts on and the earpiece, and she's doing some recon for who's down there in the 44 Club. Like, this is a packed nightclub. It's people shoulder to shoulder, and yet somehow she ends up at a table where everyone just tells her everything she needs to know about the plot. Where the girl mentions, "This is what happened to that Russian girl." Like that was very like,
Right.
oh, come on. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
there's probably another way she could have found that out, or it couldn't have just been blurted out by somebody. She like, here's a stranger, and you're the and you're just gonna talk to her about all this stuff. Everyone was remarkably loose lipped in that scene, and I feel like same thing too with like, how is Batman the only one who thought to press that little question mark on the rat maze that opened up the to the Batman envelope? Remember, they weren't at the crime scene anymore. They were
Right.
at the morgue. Okay. So this maze and this crime scene has been processed. This maze has been brought to the morgue for further forensic testing, but nobody ever thought to press the button on it that has a question
Right.
mark except for Batman to
Yeah.
find the envelope addressed to him. So like in these kinds of movies, that kind of stuff happens, and you got to just sort of, deal with it. As long as the overall package is good and there haven't been twists that like made zero sense, you just kind of go with it. So yeah, to me, there are those little kinks in the armor, but I'm not gonna dwell on them. I'm not gonna dwell on them. I
Right.
promise. Um, but in terms of Penguin now, now there's been a lot of talk about Colin Farrell and all this makeup that he's under and this crazy, like, to me, it's crazy that they hired someone as well known as Colin Farrell is and then hid him under all that makeup. But now that we've seen the performance, I'm very grateful. How about you?
I
What did you think of Farrell's Penguin?
his I mean, the artists there, like the makeup
Yeah,
artists, like they better win something because like he is completely, utterly
yep,
unrecognizable. I mean,
mm-hmm,
voice, look, and it looks so good. It
yep,
looks real. I believe that's a real person, and I
yep,
love that he went for like the gangster style. I love the choice. I like every choice he made. He swung
yeah,
big. He's definitely one of like the bigger, larger than life characters in a way. Definitely
yes,
with his personality, I should say. But it worked and it fit and it was I mean it was tremendous and like basically it was like an origin, not an origin story for him, but it really it's incredible. Like even some of like the minor or like secondary characters had like
yeah,
really big complete arcs, and the movie left them
mm-hmm,
off in these just like amazing places. Like what a feat. Like like he used
yeah.
that
Well,
3 hours to such great effect, like where I could name a
yeah,
million movies probably that get so bogged down when you have too many characters. And granted, like not all 3 hours long, they may be closer to two and everything, but like he utilized the time.
yeah,
That runtime was utilized like
yeah.
perfectly.
Well, and look, it totally got me all kinds of excited for this Penguin spinoff, which I wasn't
Right.
before. Before I'm like, I'm not big on movie spinoff series in general. But then again, Peacemaker got me all excited, right? And now this one, look, the fact that now we see this power vacuum where Falcone's gone, and in this movie, you see the Penguin start putting the pieces together, realizing, oh, wait a minute, this could all be mine now, because
Right.
Carmine was the guy, and he's gone, and I could step in and fill that role. But you can also tell that like he's not all there. There's something about him that's a little broken. Like the way he says, "I got you," when he
Yeah.
thinks he killed Batman. Like, well, I'm going to give you a quote that I think informs what makes his Oswald Cobblepot so unique. Because his inspiration, I find interesting, and it does come through. So let me just read what he said first. Um, let's see. Let me just make sure I read the right quote.
Yeah.
Here
Definitely
we
make sure you
go.
read the right one.
It would be nice if I read the right quote. All right, here we go. So he said, there's a certain amount of brokenness in Oz that I think, as a reference, not for me performance wise, but just emotionally, as a reference for Matt, I think Fredo from The Godfather was a bit of a reference. Matt was just talking about somebody who had very real and very lofty ambitions, but never really had the opportunity or the chance to explore them, and was maybe looked upon as someone who was handicapped, whether it was psychologically, intellectually. Fredo was frowned upon as less than the other brothers. And maybe Oz as well in his life was looked upon as somebody who wasn't capable. And so that's one of the things that fuels Oz. I'm like, what an interesting sort of like psychopathy to base the character in.
Yeah.
This idea that he's got these ambitions, but he's always been underestimated. People see him as just kind of like, maybe damaged goods, or he's never good enough to be the guy. But
His
now
nickname's
he's
the
about,
Penguin.
yeah,
They
yeah, yeah.
That shows you right there that they definitely see him as different. They don't.
Yeah,
They
and
give
that's
him
a
goofy
totally new
nicknames.
way to show him. Yeah. Because up
Yeah.
until now, whenever we've seen the Penguin, he's like the leader of his little crime family, you know?
Right.
But here in this context, he's kind of like a henchman who is now about to step up and assume, the major domo role in this crime family, so to speak. So it's gonna be really interesting to see where they go with that. And actually, there was even a comparison to Scarface that I want to share when it comes to this spinoff. One of the producers, a guy by the name of Dylan Clark, said, we're doing a spinoff with Colin Farrell as Oswald Cobblepot, seeing Oz rise to power, almost like a Scarface story. So here we go. We have the Godfather reference. We have Scarface. It's exciting to do something like that just as a standalone, but it speaks to the character and our movie, so that you'll go back to the movie and say, oh, I see that backstory there. That line refers to this. We have to get into what made him the man he is. So that's interesting because it seems like it's going to be a series that simultaneously sequelizes the Batman, but perhaps also flashes back to show us how Oz even got to this position to where he's now going to take over and be the head of this crime syndicate. You know what I mean?
Right.
So I can't wait to see what Colin Farrell does in that setting where the focus is just on him with this character that we only got a small taste of, but got us all kinds of excited. I
Yeah.
can't wait to see what Farrell does and basically like a long form character exploration here for his Oz.
Yeah, that's why
Um,
you get Colin Farrell. Even if you're going to cover him up all the
yeah,
makeup, you get Colin Farrell to make amazing choices like that as an actor.
it's true. It's
Yeah.
true. And speaking of like amazing choices and amazing acting and getting the most out of people with even limited screen time, I mean, Alfred, I think, was only in 3 or 4 scenes, and
Yeah.
none of them are terribly long. And we don't even get to see any of the backstory where he's raising Bruce like his son or training him to be the Batman. We don't have any of the benefit of any of that stuff. We just have these 4 scenes between Alfred and present day Bruce, and wouldn't you know it, in that hospital sequence when they take hands there at the end, I was all kinds of emotional. I had a big lump in my throat, and I
Yeah.
found myself super invested in this relationship between this Alfred and this Bruce. And it's incredible because we've barely seen them together. We've
Yeah.
barely seen them do anything. Did you notice that? Did you
Yeah, I
feel
mean
that way?
they clearly had and I think I mean definitely on purpose. They clearly had like a strained relationship. They didn't have the relationship we're used to seeing
Yeah.
in a lot of the comics or in the movies. Like it's very strained, and like that was their reconciliation right there. So I expect him to be much more active in any sequel we get. And again, if you want to know where this Alfred Pennyworth kind of came from, check out Earth One. It's very
Mhm.
much the Earth One Alfred Pennyworth.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think they almost cribbed that completely. Like,
And
so
how heartbreaking was it to hear Bruce like verbalize his fear of losing someone again? Because that's something that I guess we don't specifically think about. We think about the tragic loss of losing his parents and the imprint that left on him. But also when you think about like the scar tissue, the trauma, the PTSD of that, when
hmm
as a young child you lose the most important people in your world, now for the rest of your life, whenever you have to consider that someone else you care about might be dead, that's going to trigger all kinds of crazy things for you because like, wait a minute, I
yeah,
almost lost you and I wasn't ready for that. And in the scene there at the hospital, the way he explains it to Alfred, and that's what leads to their sort of emotional reconciliation, that Bruce was like, basically, you can't put me in this position again. I can't lose you too, essentially.
hmm
That was just super powerful. Um, and something that I thought was interesting and kind of a unique sort of twist on Alfred, which maybe comes from Earth One, and I will read it. Not surprisingly, I've read Superman Earth One, but I haven't done Batman Earth One. But for this Alfred, something that I don't know if this is from the books, but it gives the impression that he was more than just a butler. Where when he says the line about it was my job to protect him, and he's talking about Thomas, that he basically seems to carry this guilt like Thomas and Martha died, but it was actually Alfred's fault because he was like the head of their security, essentially.
right,
He said a line like that I've never, I've never kind of heard it stated that way or presented that way, where he's not just the guy who's holding down, Wayne Manor and making sure that they've got tea and all that kind of stuff. In
right,
this continuity, it seems like he was the person in charge of making sure that they're safe and that all their logistics are covered. And the fact that they got killed on his watch eats at him and perhaps fuels why he takes such good care of Bruce and why he's so invested, because this kid's an orphan because I screwed up and I have to carry this with me for the rest of my life. You
yeah.
could
It gives him
feel
a little
some of
more,
that torture. Yeah.
motivation.
I've never seen Alfred with kind of like that guilt on his back like that.
Yeah,
Um but yeah, so we got one big tease at the end for where things could go. And I spoke about this with Bill in the Batman on film portion of things here, but I want to ask you what you thought of the tease when Riddler starts speaking to this guy in the cell next over, and we kind of discover he's who, Brett?
He might be the Joker. or
Yes.
or some type of proto Joker, as
Yeah.
I've also heard floated around from Matt Reeves. But it definitely
Yes.
is someone who will become the Joker that we know and love. Do we love
So
him? I
when
don't know.
you so when you saw that, what was your reaction?
Yeah, immediately. First of all, let's just give a little nice little golf clap to just how many locations from the mythos that Reeves was able to pack in here. There's
Oh
a
yeah.
there's a drop of Blackgate. There's a name drop of Bloodhaven, which famously we
Yep.
know is where Nightwing ends up settling when he kind of splits off from Bruce. We got Arkham Asylum, which
Yep.
we really, I mean, we've seen it in the Nolan films too, but we got a couple other big drops too. But anyway, that's just like awesome that we had all these. Oh, the Iceberg Lounge and 44 Below. Obviously, that is
Oh,
a big thing.
I
Like
love the
so many
Iceberg
great
Lounge.
places
Yeah.
they pulled from it, which is so
Hmm.
awesome. But we have Arkham Asylum. We actually got to see the inmates. This has been my dream. I just wanted to see him like walk down a hallway and like run into inmates. And then as soon as they had Dano in there at the end, and then that voice came through, I immediately
Yep.
like grabbed my fiance's arm, and I was just like, "Oh, they're doing it!" Like I didn't think he was. I really didn't think he was gonna do it. And I'm
Yeah.
actually gonna tell you, there's like 90% of me was totally on board. 10% of me was like, you always tease the Joker at the end of the first movie. I was like, hold that to the third one. They always do
Yeah.
that. So 10%
Yeah.
of me was kind of like, but at the same time, I was so pumped. But I
Yeah.
loved that interaction, and that you can just imagine the conversations that they're gonna have, and what
Yep.
hell that's gonna mean for our Batman later down the line. If
And
they
even
do
that
go down that
line,
route.
Gotham loves a comeback. Because it's true though,
Yeah,
too. Like, and that feeds into the
the
comic
comic
book
book.
mythology of like, Batman's rogues never get killed off. They always come back, and there's always, that somehow they
They
escape
didn't kill
Arkham.
anyone.
There's
They
always a
didn't
new
kill
plot.
anyone in this
They didn't
movie.
kill anyone. I know. What a shocker.
They
But,
left. They
but
left him more. He can come back and do more crap.
yeah. But like I feel like that was perfect though too, because like, there's the whole central crisis for the Batman character of like he'd probably be better off killing some of these guys because they keep coming out and wreaking more havoc and causing more destruction and harming more innocents, but he has his no kill rule, right? And
Right.
in this sense, Joker saying that Gotham loves its comeback stories. It's like, yeah, all these villains eventually get a chance to redeem themselves at some point because that's what happens when you don't kill them. But
Yeah.
so, but I will say that I won't get into it too much. I did get into it a little earlier with Bill. That was the one thing that to me didn't fly. That to
Mm.
me, I was like, I know how I should feel. I know this is supposed to be the big, oh crap, Joker thing. But for me, with all the Jokering lately, with the Joaquin Phoenix Joker, with the Jared Leto Joker, with the fact that Batman Begins ended with the tease of the Joker, I honestly, I'm like, the last tease I needed was for a Joker thing. Like, if they would have saved that for the end of the second movie, then I think it would have been better off. I think that was the one
Yeah.
thing that Matt Reeves planted in there that for me fell just kind of flat. I'm like, I'm not excited, and I should be. I should be
Right.
thrilled, but I'm not. Um,
Like it
but
in.
go ahead.
Oh no! Finish your point.
No. I was going to segue into where I hope they do go, which is the rumor that Pattinson and Kravitz keep kind of floating around. But before we
Right.
get into where they could go, finish your
Yeah, I
Joker
was
thought.
gonna say initially, like for like a couple of seconds, I didn't
Yeah,
think it was gonna be Joker, and I was
yeah,
actually hoping it was just gonna be like a cool Easter egg. And I was actually originally thinking it was gonna be like Calendar Man or something. Like I wanted him to throw like
yeah,
some just weird obscure character in there, and then they had a little back and forth. But ends
yeah,
up Joker. But I do like because one of the things too is like when they first mentioned Penguin. in the movie, Pattinson says, "Yeah, I know who he is." So it's like he's already like just aware of him, or
Yeah.
maybe has had
Yeah.
like a run in with him before at a
Hmm.
distance. And then now that they did introduce that there's a Joker locked up in Arkham, it stands that maybe they have had like a run in before, and he's not the Joker yet, and Batman beat him up and locked him up, and then that's gonna turn him into something worse. So there is like
Yeah.
definitely some intrigue down the line. Like I like that he did we know he's 2 years into his career at this point, and I
Hmm.
like that they showed that some stuff went down. Like he's had
Yeah.
some adventures already in these 2 years, which is really cool. And so let's talk about the next part,
Yeah.
and then hopefully I can get a quick rundown of just some geek out nerd moments at the end.
Yes. So look, neither one of us seems too keen on the Joker being where they go next.
You
But
might even say
Pattinson,
not to Joaquin.
oh wow. All right, thanks for being with us,
I'm not
folks.
going to be here next week, so
Leave your half-star reviews. Anyway, no, there is a place that I'm keen that they go. And Brett, I think you'd like to talk about it because Pattinson and Kravitz and others have been dropping some hints or saying where they think it could be. So talk about it. Where would you like them to go that these other people keep mentioning?
yes, yes. So it seems to be coming up that a lot of people, especially after where this film ends, a lot of people want to go to the route of Court of Owls.
Yes.
Which you find out is the real corruption under Gotham that's been
Mm-hmm.
controlling thing all along. That said, though, now I've been excited for that. I really love that storyline in the comics.
Yeah.
But I don't have it in front of me, so I apologize. But one of our listeners did actually put some YouTube comments because we mentioned Court of Owls last week, and he
Yes.
actually had said like, "How would you even do that? We don't have Robin or the Bat family because in the comics it does very much
Mm.
involve the entire extended Bat family." I mean, there's always a way to adapt that stuff, So yes,
Yeah.
they wouldn't be able to do the exact, one to one storyline.
Mm-hmm.
Listener, I'm sorry, I don't have any. I'm the worst. I'm the worst host. But they could definitely make it work. However, now just on a side tangent, and we'll go back to it. The way that this movie was all about corruption and the seedy underbelly of Gotham, it seems a little samey to me now to go that route for a sequel. I mean, I'm sure you
Mm.
could go a little crazier, and there is a more fantastical element with the assassins being basically like undead people. So there's also that, and we've talked a little bit about fantastical elements last week, I think, on the show with Matt Reeves, and if like Superman could exist, and he likes to focus on one fantastical element at a time. So
Yeah.
there's a lot of details there. So I don't know now if this is where they're going to go, but I think it would be really cool. It still would be cool to go there. It's a very, very cool storyline. It really puts Batman to the test. And it really tests like how well he knows this city. So
Yeah.
but like everyone's talking about it, so that gets me excited if the actors are into it. I'm like, hey, maybe it is the right way to go.
Yeah.
What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like the Court of Owls thing, I think there's a way to do it. Just like with this version of the Penguin, just like with this version of the Catwoman. You take certain creative liberties and you make it fit the world that you're trying to build out. And I think there's a way to tell a story about this secret society that is really kind of pulling all the strings and kind of what the history is of that and what he's going to have to do to rid Gotham of that. I think there's definitely stuff there worth investigating.
Yeah.
um but though honestly, since I walked into this plot wise trying to go as like spoiler free as possible and trying to just go with the ride and not have very limited expectations for how things were going to go, and then Matt Reeves blew me away with where he did go.
Mm-hmm.
I'm kind of in this place where wherever he goes next, I'm ready to follow. You
He has
know?
carte blanche.
Yeah, it's like at this point, okay, now you've won over my trust, you've won over my confidence. If wherever you go next is something where I'm totally like, I'll follow you off the deep end if you're going
Right.
to keep giving me stories that play out like this and that feel like this. Because, like, to borrow what you said earlier, this movie felt so fucking Batman. It's just right out of the gate from the opening to that opening confrontation with the goons and the train
Yep.
trestle, and then everything that happened afterward, just like his voice, his body language, his silhouette, her silhouette when him and Catwoman were talking together. I'm like, this is just classic, straight up Batman storytelling here.
Yeah.
And that grimy, weird Gotham. And I love that it's this weird conglomeration of like Chicago and New York. And
Much more New York, I thought, versus Nolan's, which was like just
yeah,
Nolan's was Chicago. It was shot in Chicago.
Well,
It was
especially
Chicago.
for the latter two. Yeah, in the
Yeah,
first one, he tried to like
yeah,
disguise it, and the next two is just like, all right, it's Chicago.
yeah. It's mostly Chicago. There was a little
Yeah,
New York, I think, for like the stock exchange or something. But
yeah,
yeah, but this movie was decidedly more New York. I mean, we had Gotham Square Garden, and we
yeah,
basically had
yeah,
Times Square, and the
with the
fact
same
that
logo. Yeah,
yeah,
same
with the
font,
same
I should
logo,
say.
which is
Yeah,
amazing, and that it was also Gotham in this was like a full island, like
yeah,
Manhattan.
yeah, yeah,
So
yeah.
there was
By the
that.
way, the viewer who sent in the note about the Court of Owls is Scythe Life. Scythe
Thank
Life
you.
on YouTube. You're the one who pointed out that it would be very hard to do the Court of Owls without Damien and all that other stuff. Um, but you know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
Okay. So I feel like we could probably riff on the Batman forever, but we can certainly come back to things in later episodes. So for now, I want to let you hone in on those last few cool geek things that you wanted to, and then we could bring this episode home.
I'm gonna rapid fire, kind
All
of
right, rapid
try to rapid
fire me
fire.
the things that made you nerdgasm, Brett.
Okay, so like I mentioned earlier in the episode, this was a Batman checklist. So it's like Batman beating the crap out of people, check.
A
Okay, Batman using gadgets, got a lot of gadgets. It was great.
lot of
Was
gadgets.
obligatory, awesome Batmobile chase scene. We got it.
Yep.
uh, Amazing buddy cop relationship with Gordon. That was the best out of any Batman film, and I loved it so much. Especially the part when he told Gordon no guns, and he went, "Well, that's your thing." There was like
That's
a
your
cute
thing.
little line from Jeffrey Wright. Was amazing, amazing casting for that.
Yeah.
So we got that. We also got Batman just being heroic. Like really heroic and saving people and not just like lurking in the dark. We got the obligatory Batman fighting in a dark hallway. We should just talk about how when he snuck into the Iceberg Lounge, he cut the power. And then we have that amazing scene where he's just walking down the hallway, and the only time you see him is the muzzle flashes of the guns.
Yeah.
Really,
Oh,
just tremendous. Also, that he totally injected himself. And for a second, I was like, is he injecting himself with like venom, like from Bane? But when I got shot in the chest towards the end and he was like
yeah.
completely knocked out, it was obviously like an adrenaline shot
Yeah.
where he went crazy. But a second, I was like, are they like introducing like venom in here?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
like he's
Yeah.
using it because I'm like, that's like that would have been really off the walls.
Yeah.
So just the moment where they catch Penguin and they have the handcuffs on his hands and legs, and then they leave him, and he's like, I'm still here, and then you actually get to see him waddle like a penguin, which was just cute and just really
Yeah.
great that they put that in there. Um, just everything with the Riddler. The Riddler legit felt like the Riddler from the Arkham games, which I really
Oh
appreciate with
yeah.
like
Yeah.
kind of like
Yeah.
saw-ish traps. Like I felt like I was like, is he gonna get a Riddler trophy? Are we gonna find a Riddler trophy in here somewhere? So there was just some really, really great stuff with that. Oh my goodness. I think that was like my big Batman checklist. Like
Yeah.
he literally
We got the grappling hook and the stairwell and all that sort of thing too.
fighting the cops was really the relationship between him and the police in this was
Yes.
really well done. I love
Yes.
that. I mean, they literally just they like I said, there was a Batman checklist and they just was like, yep, we got that, we got this, we got this in there, we got that in there. Like they nailed everything.
And
It was just tremendous. And that final third act fight I thought was just wow. I mean, it was like so powerful, emotional. The stakes were so high.
mm-hmm.
Oh my
Mm-hmm.
god, I could talk about this movie forever. We're gonna have to talk
Yes.
about. We have to see it again, and then we have to talk about it again. We'll have to do like a second spoiler cast. I
Or
don't
maybe,
know,
exactly. We may have to after our second viewing.
but
But
hopefully you geeked out at those moments too. I would
oh
love to
no,
hear your
yeah,
favorite moments. I mean, this is to the listeners.
yeah,
Definitely
yeah.
let us
Let us
hit us up
know.
with your favorite moments. We can definitely talk about them on the show next time. Actually, I should mention I will not be on the show next week, not because of my bad jokes. I'm away next week, so unless we can film something early, we'll see.
Yeah.
But I may not be here. You might get a nice little solo Mario episode. but
It
don't be
might
mean
be
about
an
it.
old
Don't be
school
mean about it
the
because I'll be back.
fanboy. You know what I'm saying? I won't be mean. I'll just talk all kinds
Yeah.
of smack about you. You know.
Not him. No, don't be mean, listeners.
Wow. Um, just one thing I wanted to circle back to with the Jim Gordon and the Batman relationship. I love the thing where they're in the interrogation room and he gets in his face, and then they're like, all right, look, I have the keys here, and you're gonna
That
punch me in
was
the
so
face
good.
and all that. And then he hits him, right? And then the next scene, he's like, you could have pulled the punch. And Batman's
I
like,
did.
I did. That was
He
like
had a lot of good one-liners.
yeah, it's funny for a movie that was as serious and as quote unquote dark as it was. There were cute little moments like the penguin waddling, and even
Yeah.
like there's a shot at Wayne Manor where you see this bust, the top of a statue, just the shoulder and the head, like a bust on the
Right.
table, and that's right out of the Adam West Batman because they would pull the head back and it
Right.
has the button that opens up the thing. I mean, obviously, I don't think that would happen in this world,
Right.
but they had the bust so that you would think
Yeah.
about that,
Cool little
and
homage.
and in the Adam West series, there was always a big thing about them climbing up buildings. And this one, he did the reverse, where Batman's running down a building. Just something about
Yes.
that visual struck me as a little bit like that's kind
You
of
just
Adam Westish too.
you just reminded me too that they rather than do him gliding with the cape, it turned into a friggin' wingsuit,
Yes.
and that was awesome. It
Yeah.
was really really cool, and
Yeah.
it was definitely a more grounded choice because it's more realistic that that
Yeah.
would work versus the cape being like that. But
Yeah.
wow, what a landing! Whew. But it was I loved him. I
Yeah.
loved it. He wasn't 2 years in. He still has not perfected it. Also, I got the sense from that, which is just credit to the directing and to Pattinson when he got on the top of that building. You legit saw him go, oh, like he was
Oh,
like, and I get the sensation that he had not used that um
yeah. Yeah.
wingsuit
Yeah.
before. Like this was the first time using it, and I thought that
Yeah.
was like a really nice touch. Like he was like, I have not had to do this yet, but I
Yeah.
have to
Yeah.
do
Yeah.
it right now. So let's hope it works. And then that landing was
And the
tremendous.
and the last thing I want to give Reeves credit for before we wrap this thing up is that none of it felt spoon-fed. Nothing was over-explained. The audience, we were never patronized. Nothing was ever spelled out for us. There's a boldness to launching a Batman series with a movie that has no formal origin, that really just hits the ground running. And here's this story, and here are these characters, and everything you're going to know about them, you're going to learn on the fly as this story unfolds. All this time, a lot of the stories that we've been watching these last 15 years in this golden age of superhero storytelling, the storytelling is pretty straightforward and linear, and it follows a certain sort of pattern. And you kind of, this it throws all that out the window, and you like we never had to have any explanations for where these gadgets came from. That we didn't have to have Lucius Fox explaining what these contacts do, or here's what the Batwing suit is like, or here's why your car had. It's just this is what's happening. Everybody,
Yeah. I
keep
love the
up,
contacts, by the
and we're
way.
going. Yeah.
The
So
contacts are nice.
overall, like he made a Batman movie that is for serious Batman fans and that doesn't patronize and that doesn't spoon feed you anything. And I think that took balls and he pulled it off.
Yeah.
And I think in all, like if you were to give this thing a grade, what would be your grade if you were a professor and you were giving like a letter grade? What is your grade for Batman?
Yeah, I mean it's an A+ for me, dog. All right.
Woo!
Woo.
Wow, you gave it the perfect. See, me being me, I like to give myself some place to go in future viewings, and I want to, I don't want to start right at the top because what if I like it even more on the next viewing? I can't go to A plus plus. What is this? So I'm giving it an A minus with room for improvement. But listen, A minus is a good score here. All right. So folks, let us know what you thought of the Batman. Let us know
Yes.
what you thought of this episode. Please, like, subscribe, and review. Uh, Tell your friends about the Fanboy podcast. We are here. We have the email address that we want you to start using, which is the fanboy podcast at gmail.com. That's where you could send questions or notes or anything you want related to this here show, because things are going to start getting more interactive in the weeks and months ahead. So we want to be able to directly communicate with y'all a little more.